The morning light over Portland had that soft golden haze that made everything look kinder than it really was. At the corner of Pine and 8th Street, the little Sunrise Bakery opened its doors to the scent of fresh bread and cinnamon rolls. It was supposed to be an ordinary day until two small voices changed everything. "Sir, please, can we pay later? Our mom's really sick at home." The cashier froze, holding a loaf of bread midair. Behind the counter, silence hung heavier than the smell of yeast. The two little girls twins barely 8 stood on tiptoe just to see over the counter. Their matching braids, their trembling hands, the hopeful way they looked up, it was the kind of sight that could stop anyone in their tracks. And it did, because standing a few steps behind them, adjusting the sleeve of his tailored coat, was Adrian Miles, a man used to buying everything he wanted except peace of mind. What happened next would rewrite the course of his life and theirs forever. Before we go on, pause for a second. What would you do if you were in Adrian's place? Would you walk away, or would you listen to the whisper of something deeper? Leave your answer below, because what's coming next might just change how you see kindness forever. The bakery's warmth didn't reach Adrian. His world was all glass towers and cold boardrooms where deals were made in millions, and smiles were worn like armor. He had stepped into Sunrise Bakery simply to kill time before a meeting craving nothing more than a coffee and a quiet moment. But now his attention was locked on the twins, Hazel and Grace Bennett, standing in front of a loaf of bread as though it were gold. Mr. Thompson, the old baker, shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sorry, girls, we don't keep tabs here, you know that." Hazel's lower lip trembled. Grace reached for her sister's hand, squeezing tight. "Please, sir. Mom couldn't get up today. We haven't eaten since yesterday." Adrian's chest tightened. Something about those words hit harder than expected. Maybe it was the sincerity. Maybe it was the way the older sister tried to be brave for them both. Or maybe it was because he had once known hunger not for food, but for affection, for belonging. The kind no amount of money could buy. He stepped forward before he even realized it. "How much is the bread?" 3 heads turned. The twins looked up at him, startled by the sudden voice. Mr. Thompson hesitated. $3.25. Adrian reached for his wallet, the smooth leather creasing under his fingers. He pulled out a 20 and placed it on the counter. "Cover theirs and keep the change." Hazel blinked, confused. Grace stared speechless, then whispered, "Thank you, sir. We'll pay you back when Mom's better." Adrian shook his head. "No need, just take care of her." They took the bread as if it were something sacred. At the door, both turned around, 2 small silhouettes against the bright morning light. Hazel gave a shy wave. Grace smiled a small, genuine, disarming smile, and they were gone. For a long moment, Adrian didn't move. The baker muttered something about good people still existing, but Adrian barely heard him. The air inside the shop suddenly felt heavier, as if those 2 little girls had carried something out with them and left something else behind. He walked out into the Portland streets, the city alive with motion, unaware of the quiet storm brewing inside him. He could have gone back to his penthouse overlooking the river. He could have buried the incident under meetings, investments, and luxury. But the words lingered like an echo he couldn't silence. "Can we pay later? Our mom's really sick at home." He found himself turning at the next corner, scanning the sidewalks, the intersections, the faces passing by, looking for the twins without knowing why. He saw them in his mind, their thin arms, their old shoes, the way Grace clutched that loaf of bread as if it were life itself. He stopped by a cafe window, catching his own reflection in the glass, impeccable suit, perfect hair expression, unreadable. For the first time in years, he didn't recognize the man staring back. Why did it matter so much? Why did the desperation in those girls' voices pierce through the layers of detachment he had built? Maybe because kindness, once it touches a raw nerve, refuses to fade. Back at the Harbor View Hotel, the marble lobby greeted him like always, cold, polished, indifferent. The concierge smiled. The elevator hummed softly as it carried him upward. But even in his quiet penthouse with its panoramic view of Portland's skyline, Adrian couldn't shake the image of those little hands clutching bread like treasure. He set the grocery bag he'd bought earlier on the marble counter, imported fruit, bottled water, pastries. All the things he took for granted. Then he sat motionless, staring out the window as the city shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. Somewhere out there, those two girls were walking home to a sick mother. Somewhere, a small family was surviving on courage alone. And somewhere deep inside, a man who thought he had everything realized he might have nothing that truly mattered. That night, Adrian Miles didn't sleep. He didn't know it yet, but what had started with a simple loaf of bread was about to unravel the carefully constructed world he had spent his whole life building and replace it with something he had never known before: purpose. And that was just the beginning. Adrian Miles didn't return to Sunrise Bakery for several days, but the image of the twin girls wouldn't leave his mind. He had spent most of his life mastering the art of forgetting where he came from, what it felt like to go to bed hungry, what it meant to need anyone. Yet, no matter how many emails he answered or meetings he took that morning, replayed like a song stuck on loop. Two small voices, one loaf of bread, a debt that didn't exist but somehow felt personal. He stood in front of the glass wall of his penthouse looking out over Portland's skyline. The city stretched endlessly, beautiful but indifferent. Below, headlights streamed like veins of light through the rain. He could buy any building that caught his eye, any company that impressed him. But he couldn't buy peace, not the kind that let a man rest easy. His assistant, Ethan Cruz, noticed the change. "You've been quiet lately," he said one morning, setting down a stack of reports. "Too quiet even for you." Adrian didn't look up from the papers. "Ethan, can you do something for me?" Ethan hesitated. "Of course. I need you to find out who those girls were, the ones at Sunrise Bakery." Ethan frowned. "You mean the twins you mentioned the other day? You really want to track them down? That's unusual for you. I just want to make sure they're okay." Ethan studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, I'll see what I can do." It took only a few days. Money could open doors, but information, especially about those who had none, came from the quiet corners of the city. Ethan returned with a manila folder and placed it on Adrian's desk. "Their names are Hazel and Grace Bennett. They live with their mother, Claire Bennett, in an old apartment complex on the east side near Burnside. The mother works at St. Mary's Medical Center, laundry department." Adrian opened the folder. A grainy photograph showed a woman in her early 30s, dark hair, tied-back eyes, tired but alert. Two smiling girls stood beside her holding each other's hands. The caption under the hospital ID card read, "Claire Bennett, Hospital Services." He looked at that picture for a long time. "Anything else?" he asked quietly. Ethan hesitated again. "She's been taking double shifts for months. No husband in the picture. Her health? Not great. Some kind of respiratory condition. She's behind on rent." Adrian leaned back, closing the file. The guilt he didn't understand tightened in his chest. "Thank you, Ethan. That'll be all." That night, Adrian didn't go to his usual restaurant or rooftop lounge. He found himself driving instead, no destination, just movement. The rain came down in silver sheets, blurring the city lights into watercolor. At a red light, his car idled across from a narrow alley where two small figures huddled by a recycling bin. He blinked, leaned forward. It couldn't be. But it was. Hazel and Grace, wearing the same worn jackets, were stuffing crushed soda cans into a bag. Every so often, they'd laugh pure bright laughter that didn't belong in such a place. Hazel counted softly. That's 23 cents more. Grace, we're getting closer. Grace raised her small fist in triumph. Adrian's hand froze on the steering wheel. The light turned green. Cars honked behind him, impatient. He didn't move. He rolled down the window slightly, the damp air biting his face. The girls worked quickly, moving with practiced efficiency. They weren't begging, they weren't complaining, they were surviving together. Something in him broke open. He parked half a block away and sat there just watching. His instinct said to help, but another voice whispered that barging in might rob them of something more precious than money dignity. So he stayed in the shadows, a silent witness to their quiet resilience. A week later, he found himself outside their apartment complex, an aging building with peeling paint and flickering hallway lights. He waited in his car as the evening faded. Through a cracked curtain, he saw Claire, moving slowly, folding uniforms, coughing into a tissue before returning to stir a pot on the stove. Hazel and Grace sat nearby, doing homework under the yellow glow of a lamp. The scene was so ordinary, so small, and yet to Adrian it felt monumental. He remembered the words of his father, a man long gone. People don't ask for help because they're proud. They ask because they've already run out of ways to fix things. Adrian thought about that all night. The next morning, he called Ethan. If I wanted to help someone anonymously, he began, how would I do it? Ethan raised an eyebrow. That depends. How much help are we talking about? Groceries, rent, maybe a few medical bills? Ethan gave a small smile. That's not exactly your usual investment portfolio. Consider it personal interest. Later that evening, a small delivery arrived at the Bennett apartment, 2 boxes neatly wrapped left by the door. Inside were groceries, children's books, and a pair of matching teddy bears with tags that read, "From someone with kind eyes." When Hazel found the note, she squealed and ran to her mother. "Mom, the man from the bakery sent this. He remembered us." Claire stared at the boxes, her brow tightening. "No, honey, people don't just send things for free." But Mom Grace said softly, "What if he's just kind?" Claire sighed, a mix of pride and fatigue. "There's always a reason, sweetheart." Still, that night she allowed them to keep the bears. She told herself it was only for the girls. She didn't know that across town in a high-rise penthouse overlooking the Willamette River, Adrian sat in silence, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars, wondering if a single act of kindness could ever be enough to fix something broken inside a stranger or inside himself. In that moment, he didn't realize that he hadn't just stepped into their story. Their story had already begun to rewrite his. The knock on the door came just as Claire Bennett was lacing up her shoes for another double shift at the hospital. She hesitated, glanced at the clock. It was barely 7. Hazel and Grace were still eating breakfast, the smell of toast and instant cocoa filling their small apartment. When she opened the door, she didn't expect to see Adrian Miles standing there holding a small paper bag from Sunrise Bakery. "Good morning," he said, his tone polite but unsure. "I wanted to drop this off. Thought your girls might like some fresh bread." Claire's expression stiffened instantly. "You shouldn't have come here." "It's just bread," he replied quietly. "No strings attached." Her eyes narrowed. "People like you don't show up at places like this for no reason." Behind her, Hazel peeked out smiling when she saw him. "It's the man from the bakery." Grace ran over, her eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, he remembered us." Claire stepped aside gently, pushing the door closed enough to block the view. "You need to go," she said firmly. "We're fine." Adrian hesitated, nodding slightly. "I understand. But for what it's worth, I didn't come here out of pity." Then why she challenged? He met her eyes, steady and calm. Because your daughters reminded me that people can still be kind without asking for anything back. I'd forgotten that. For a second, Claire said nothing. The defensive wall she'd built for years began to crack, but only slightly. You should leave, she said again, softer this time. He handed her the bag anyway and walked away without another word. Inside, Hazel tore it open to reveal a loaf of bread and a small note tucked beneath it. In neat handwriting it said, "From someone who believes in you." Claire stared at the note for a long moment before slipping it into a drawer. She didn't throw it away, but she didn't display it either. That afternoon, while changing linens at St. Anne, Mary's medical center, Claire's co-worker noticed her coughing. "You should take a day off," the woman said. "Can't," Claire replied, forcing a smile. "Bills don't take days off." By evening, her body ached, her chest felt tight, and every breath came with effort. Still, she managed to walk home, groceries in hand. She found Hazel and Grace sitting at the small kitchen table, proudly showing her a drawing they'd made a family of 3 standing under a bright yellow sun. "That's you, Mom," Grace said, pointing. "And that's him, the man who helped us." Claire managed a smile, her heart tightening in her chest, not from illness this time, but from the unbearable thought of hope returning to her children's eyes. "You two have big hearts," she whispered. "But remember, kindness can be complicated." That night, the coughing got worse. She tried to keep quiet so the girls wouldn't wake, but a sharp pain in her chest forced her to her knees. She barely made it to the couch before collapsing. Hazel woke first. "Mom," she whispered, shaking her shoulder. When Claire didn't respond, panic filled the room. Grace began to cry. Hazel remembered the hotel logo she had seen on the paper bag earlier that morning, Harbor View Hotel. The man from the bakery had stayed there. Without thinking, the girls threw on their coats and ran into the cold night. The streets were nearly empty, the air damp and sharp. Hazel held Grace's hand tightly as they crossed intersections and followed the faint glow of the tall hotel sign. When they burst through the revolving door of the lobby, gasping for breath, the concierge rushed toward them. "Girls, are you okay?" Hazel shook her head. "We need to find Mr. Miles. Please, it's an emergency. Our mom can't breathe." Adrian, who had just returned from a late meeting, turned at the sound of his name. He froze when he saw the 2 little girls standing there, soaked from the rain, tears streaking their faces. "Hazel, Grace." "What happened? It's Mom. She's sick. She won't wake up," Hazel cried. Adrian didn't ask another question. He grabbed his coat and car keys. "Come on, get in the car." The drive to their apartment was a blur. He found Claire unconscious on the floor, her breathing shallow. The paramedics arrived minutes later, but those minutes felt like years. Adrian rode with them in the ambulance, Hazel clutching his arm the whole way. At St. Mary's, chaos took over. Doctors and nurses swarmed around Claire as the twins waited in a corner, their small hands trembling. Adrian tried to stay composed, but inside panic clawed at him. He was used to controlling situations, negotiating deals, commanding rooms, but here none of that mattered. When the nurse asked about insurance, Hazel looked up helplessly. "We don't have any." Adrian stepped forward. "Put everything under my name." The nurse hesitated. "Are you family?" He glanced down at the girls, then back at her. "Tonight I am." Hours passed. When the doctor finally emerged, Adrian braced for the worst. But the news brought relief: pneumonia, serious but treatable. She would recover with rest and medication. He walked quietly into the hospital room. Claire lay pale, but breathing steadily. The twins were asleep in 2 chairs by her bed, holding hands. Adrian pulled a blanket over them, then sat by the window. When Claire opened her eyes, confusion flickered across her face. "What happened?" she whispered. "You scared them half to death," Adrian said gently. "They came to find me at the hotel." She looked away, shame coloring her cheeks. "You shouldn't have gotten involved." "I didn't have a choice," he replied softly. "They did." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of machines filled the silence. Then Claire said quietly, "I don't understand you." "Why do you care?" Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Because once someone cared about me when they didn't have to, and I never said thank you. Maybe this is my chance to make it right." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "You don't owe us anything." "Maybe not," he said, standing. "But sometimes doing what's right isn't about what we owe. It's about what we can give." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Will you stay?" He looked back, meeting her gaze. "As long as you need me to." That night, as the rain tapped softly against the hospital window, Adrian Miles sat in the dim light beside the bed of a woman he barely knew, and realized that for the first time in years he wasn't trying to escape his own life. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. The first morning after Claire was admitted to St. Mary's Medical Center was quiet in a way that unnerved Adrian Miles. Hospitals had a way of making even the most confident people feel powerless. The hum of fluorescent lights, the steady rhythm of machines, the sterile smell, everything whispered that control was an illusion. He had spent the night in the uncomfortable chair beside Claire's bed. The twins slept curled up together under his coat, exhaustion softening their features. He'd meant to leave once she stabilized, but every time he stood, something inside him resisted. There was a gravity to this room that kept pulling him back. When Claire opened her eyes that morning, her voice was a rasp. "You're still here." Adrian straightened, embarrassed. "I thought someone should be." She studied him, suspicion flickering behind her gratitude. "You didn't have to do that. The girls, they shouldn't be your responsibility." He nodded. "They're not. But I couldn't leave them alone." Claire looked away, her expression softening as she saw Hazel and Grace still sleeping. "They've had to grow up too fast," she whispered. "I keep telling myself it's temporary, but sometimes I wonder if I'm lying to them." Adrian hesitated, then said quietly, "You're doing more than most would. You just needed someone to stand beside you for a while." For a moment, neither spoke. It wasn't a romantic silence, it was heavier than that, filled with unspoken truths and reluctant understanding. Later that day, while doctors discussed her recovery, Adrian stepped into the hallway to take a call. Ethan's voice came through calm but concerned. "You've been off the radar for 2 days. Should I clear your meetings?" "Do it," Adrian said. Ethan paused. "You're staying with them, aren't you?" Adrian exhaled. "Yeah, I guess I am." There was a pause. "Then do it right," Ethan said. "Don't just write checks. Be there." Adrian ended the call and looked through the glass wall at the hospital room. Inside, Hazel was reading aloud from a picture book, while Grace giggled at the funny parts. Claire watched them with a faint smile, her eyes tired but peaceful. For the first time, Adrian saw something he couldn't quantify or purchase: belonging. Over the next few days, he became a quiet fixture in their lives. He brought breakfast from Sunrise Bakery, sat with the twins while Claire napped, and helped Hazel practice her spelling words. He was awkward at first, like a man learning a new language, but the girls made it easy. Hazel, bold and curious, asked questions about everything. Grace, gentler but sharp, always followed her sister's lead. On the 4th evening, Claire insisted he go home. "You've done more than enough," she said. "You don't owe us anything." Adrian smiled. "Maybe not. But I don't feel like I'm doing this out of debt." She frowned slightly. "Then why?" He took a moment to answer. "Because being around your girls..." It reminds me of what it's like to feel something real again." She looked at him for a long time, her guard lowering inch by inch. "I used to think people with money didn't feel anything," she admitted. "You make it look so easy from the outside." He let out a quiet laugh. "It's the biggest lie we tell ourselves, that success makes us whole." Their eyes met in a silence that didn't feel heavy this time. It felt like something new beginning. When Claire was discharged, Adrian insisted on driving them home. The girls filled the car with chatter and laughter, their joy contagious. At one point, Hazel turned to him and said, "Mom says you're our guardian angel." Claire blushed. "I did not say that." "Kind of," Hazel argued. "You said he showed up when we needed help." Adrian smiled. "I'm no angel, just someone who took a wrong turn at the right time." The apartment was still the same. Cracked walls, flickering lights, but the mood was different now. Adrian carried the groceries in quietly, fixing the broken curtain rod without being asked. Claire stood in the doorway watching him, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she said softly, "You really don't know how to leave, do you?" He turned, smiling faintly. "Maybe I don't want to." In the days that followed, he arranged for repairs around the building, quietly, anonymously. New locks, fresh paint, even a working heater. Claire protested when she found out, but the landlord admitted someone had donated the money. She looked at Adrian that evening, shaking her head. "You're relentless." "Persistent," he corrected. "There's a difference." She laughed, really laughed for the first time since he'd met her. It was a sound that startled him, bright and unguarded. One weekend, he took the girls to the park while Claire rested. They fed ducks by the pond, their laughter echoing in the crisp autumn air. Adrian bought them hot chocolate, and Grace, with whipped cream on her nose, said, "You smile more now?" He chuckled. "Do I?" "Yeah," Hazel added. "You look less lonely." The words hit him harder than he expected. He didn't answer, but as he watched them run toward the swings, he realized they were right. For the first time in years, he wasn't counting profits or deadlines. He was just there, alive in the moment. That evening, as they returned home, Claire was waiting at the door. She looked healthier, stronger, her color returning. "They've been talking about you non-stop," she said, smiling. "You've officially replaced Saturday morning cartoons." He grinned. High praise. But as the laughter faded, something quieter took its place. Claire's gaze softened. "I owe you more than I can say." "You don't owe me anything," Adrian replied. "Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Don't stop letting people in. The walls we build to protect ourselves end up keeping the good things out, too." Her eyes glistened, but she nodded. "You talk like someone who knows." "I do," he said simply. That night, after the girls were asleep, Claire found herself staring at the window, thinking about everything that had changed. The fear, the exhaustion, the constant battle to stay afloat, it was still there, but now it felt different. Lighter. Shared. For years, she had convinced herself that she and her daughters were alone in the world. But now, there was someone who showed up without asking for anything in return. Someone who stayed. And for the first time in a long while, Claire Bennett allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the walls she'd built were finally starting to fall. By the time winter light softened over Portland, something ordinary and extraordinary had settled into the Bennett home. Claire was back on her feet, still careful with her breath, still pacing herself, but present in a way she hadn't been in months. Hazel and Grace woke to the smell of oatmeal and cinnamon, and the sound of their mother humming while she packed 2 paper bag lunches. On Sundays, without fail, a knock sounded at 8:05 a.m., and Adrian Miles stood in the doorway with a warm loaf from Sunrise Bakery and a carton of strawberries. He never stayed unless invited. Some mornings, Claire waved him in. Some mornings she didn't. Boundary by boundary respect took root like a sturdy cedar. The unthinkable thing about Adrian wasn't the money. It was his restraint. He didn't flood their lives with gifts or opinions. He showed up with time. He lifted grocery bags, replaced a leaky faucet, proofread Hazel's book report about Lewis, and Clark watched Grace compose a song on a battered keyboard with 2 broken keys. He learned the delicate art of leaving before gratitude turned into discomfort. When he lingered, it was because Claire said, "Stay for coffee," or, "Can you help me reach that top shelf?" He took those moments like a man handed water in a desert enough to live, never enough to take for granted. One evening in January, after the twins had fallen asleep under a pile of quilts, Claire set 2 mugs on the table and sat across from him. Her color had returned. Her voice carried weight again. "I'm thinking about the long term," she said. "I can't keep patching holes every month and praying the roof holds." Adrian nodded. "What do you want to change?" "My shifts are killing me. The hospital laundry is honest work, but the hours swing and the pay never keeps up. I need stability. I need to be home when they get home." He could have made 3 phone calls and opened any door in the city. Instead, he said, "If I connect you to someone in HR at Harborview, will you take it from there? No favors. Your resume, your interview, your decision." She studied him as if testing the words for strings. "You won't be in the room. I won't be anywhere near the room." She let out a breath that sounded a lot like trust, then set it up. 2 weeks later, Claire walked into the Harborview Hotel's service entrance in a clean blazer, her hair pinned back, a stack of neatly printed references in her hand. She met with a woman named Margaret in HR and made her case. She described systems she'd improved at St. Mary's fold sequences that sped output without tearing fabric, a labeling method that reduced lost items by 30%, a shift chart that reduced burnout on weekends. She asked for a daytime schedule and enough pay to keep her girls in their school. She negotiated an advance, not charity but payroll, so she could cover a month's rent and fix the heater that whined all night. She did not mention Adrian once. At home that night, she placed the offer letter on the kitchen table. The twins slid onto chairs, their eyes huge. "Does this mean you'll be home for dinner?" Grace asked. "Most nights," Claire said, voice thick. "We'll have homework at the table, and music on, and a bedtime that isn't midnight." Hazel leaned into her. "Can we make spaghetti every Thursday?" Every Thursday, Claire promised. And when she looked up, Adrian was at the sink pretending to busy himself with dishes that didn't need washing. He was smiling at the window, not at her. It made it easier to breathe. Change rolled out quiet and steady after that. Claire started at Harborview in February day shifts with predictable hours, a supervisor who listened benefits that meant sickness didn't immediately equal crisis. She took pride in the small victories. A reorder system that cut waste, a safety tweak that spared backs and shoulders. Margaret stopped by the floor one afternoon and said, "We've been trying to fix that for 6 months, and it was the kind of sentence that refills a person." The ripple reached further than the apartment. On a gray morning at Sunrise Bakery, Mr. Thompson taped a hand-lettered sign to a mason jar at the register, "Pay It Forward Bread Fund." People put in singles and fives and once a folded 20. The jar emptied and refilled, and a quiet dignity moved between strangers. No camera, no plaque. Adrian stopped by early one day and slid an envelope beneath the counter. For the jar, he told Mr. Thompson, "Use your judgment. Keep it simple." The baker nodded, eyes bright. "We'll make it last." At the girls' school, a counselor sent home a note asking if Hazel might like to try the debate club, if Grace would enjoy the spring concert. The apartment filled with flashcards and scales and laughter that didn't sound borrowed. On Thursdays, the smell of spaghetti sauce drifted into the hallway, and a neighbor knocked once to ask for the recipe. Claire handed her a photocopy with comments in the margins. Simmer longer than you think, add a pinch of sugar to the tomatoes, and realized she was sharing more than food. In March, on a day of clear blue sky, Adrian drove alone to the east side, past the glass towers, and along streets he hadn't turned down in 20 years. He parked outside a cramped corner market with sun-faded posters in the windows, and a bell that jangled when he opened the door. The same bell he could have sworn from his childhood. He placed a prepaid account at the counter, no names attached. If someone comes in short on milk or bread, he told the owner say a neighbor covered it. The man squinted at him like he was trying to place a face in a long-ago yearbook, then nodded and slid the ledger away without ceremony. Adrian walked back to his car and sat with his hands on the wheel, eyes burning in a way boardrooms never prepared him for. It wasn't redemption, it was repair, one stitch at a time. Spring tugged color out of the city. On Sundays, the ritual grew coffee, fresh bread, strawberries, and a small potted herb for the kitchen, basil, mint, rosemary, green things that asked for water, and in return scented the whole room. Hazel learned to chiffonade leaves with a butter knife, proud as a chef. Grace played her song at the school concert, and when the second broken key clunked, she kept going, chin-up, hands steady. Claire squeezed Adrian's arm just once, a quiet thank you that wasn't about money. "Do you ever miss the view?" she asked another night when he was tightening a cabinet hinge and the twins were inventing a dance with too many spins. What view, he said, and didn't mean the skyline. She laughed. Fair point. He still lived at the Harbor View Hotel. He still signed deals and answered calls and disappeared into meetings with the city's movers. But his calendar now had blocks you couldn't buy with equity: Thursday dinner, Sunday breakfast, a Tuesday recital circled in pencil. He learned that meaning fits into cheap chairs and chipped mugs as naturally as it sits on leather couches. It may, in fact, prefer them. One rainy afternoon, Ethan met him at a cafe to slide a folder across the table. "The fund is set," he said, keeping his voice low. "Administered by the bakery and a neighborhood church. No names on it. Simple application, simple disbursement. Bread utilities transport small medical. No red tape, it'll run for years." Adrian didn't open the folder. "Good," he said. "I want to forget it exists." Ethan studied him. "You're different. I'm learning to stay," Adrian said, and smiled like a man who had finally found a language that made sense in his own mouth. The unthinkable act of kindness wasn't a headline or a one-time check. It was a slow, stubborn presence. It was a man who had spent a lifetime outrunning need, choosing to sit with it instead, at a wobbly table over store-brand pasta under a dim bulb someone finally replaced. It was a mother tired but unbroken, allowing help without surrendering pride. It was two girls who asked to pay later for bread and learned what it feels like when someone pays attention instead. On a Sunday that felt like the first day of summer, the four of them ate pancakes by the open window and let the warm air move through the curtains. Claire stacked plates. Hazel announced that debate club made her dangerously persuasive, and Grace hummed the bridge of her newest song. Adrian's phone buzzed on the counter 3 times, then a 4th, and then unbelievably stopped. He didn't reach for it. He didn't need to. "Question," Claire said, wiping her hands on a towel. "If we make too much spaghetti this Thursday, will you take leftovers home? I can't stand waste." He looked around the small room, the herbs in the sill, the school flyers on the fridge, the taped drawing that read, "Our Team," and felt a fullness that didn't depend on square footage or glare-proof glass. "I can do that," he said. Happily. That night, as he walked down the hallway, the twins ran ahead and turned back 2 shadows in the stairwell light. Kind eyes, Hazel called the nickname, returning like a blessing. "Don't forget Thursday, I won't," he said, meaning it. The way promises are meant when a life has been rebuilt on them. If you had stood in Sunrise Bakery months earlier and watched two little girls clutch a loaf they couldn't afford, you might have thought the miracle was a $20 bill. But anyone who's lived long enough knows the real miracle is much harder a heart deciding to open and then opening again the next day. In a city famous for its bridges, 4 people built one of their own, with bread with patience, with the quiet courage to stay.